pick 21 in the Steel City. Zach, what's going on down in Pittsburgh?
So 2 weeks ago, I would have given you a different answer for Pittsburgh. However, some things have gone down over, honestly, just this past few days that makes me think that this is becoming a realistic possibility. The Steelers' biggest need is quarterback. Currently, that room looks like Mason Rudolph, Joe Flacco, and Kenny Pickett. Would you feel comfortable with that quarterback room? I don't think I would. So the development that I was just talking about is Shedeur Sanders falling rapidly outside of the top 5, and maybe not even just the top 5, maybe outside of the top 20, and all the way to pick 21, where the quarterback needy Pittsburgh Steelers take a player that could mentor underneath Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, or start immediately in battle for the position in the preseason. If he's there, I have almost no doubt that they will make the selection. Solely because they're so quarterback needy, and 21 isn't horrible value for somebody who was projected top 5 just a few days ago. However, if Sanders is not available, and if he doesn't fall, which is still very realistic, and I think maybe some pre-draft buzz could be causing this fall, I do think that Jackson Dart is a serious possibility for the Steelers, a guy who could seriously mentor for a year, genuinely would not have to start for this squad. But if they don't go quarterback, I think that Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle, would make a fantastic addition to bolster that interior defensive line. They don't have a ton of holes on this Steelers squad in regards to the defense, but I do think interior defensive linemen would make up for some of the key losses that they had this offseason.
I agree with you that if Sanders falls, that's the obvious pick. Go get Sanders at number 21 because the Steelers absolutely desperately need a quarterback. However, I only think that the 2 quarterbacks worthy of going first round are Cam Ward, who's going to go number 1 overall, and Shedeur Sanders. I think there's a lot of experts predicting Jackson Dart to being that possible quarterback at 21 if Sanders doesn't fall to Pittsburgh. But I don't think they should do that. I don't think Dart is going to be a first round guy. I think the Steelers can definitely go get their can go get their franchise quarterback, but I don't think they need to go get that guy in the first round unless Sanders is available. I do agree with you that they can go defensive line, interior D line with their first pick if they don't go quarterback. The 2 guys that I'm keeping in mind is Walter Nolan and Kenneth Grant, though. Nolan is 8th on Pro Football Focus's big board, but interior line is not that coveted of a position this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Ole Miss Rebel falls to 21, despite him being well better than 21 on the big board. But I can see position needs of the guys in front of Pittsburgh allowing Nolan to fall to Pittsburgh. But if he doesn't fall to Pittsburgh, then I think Michigan's Kenneth Grant is going to be the name going to the Steel City.
Gotcha. And I think that's a really solid pick. This is one of the deepest defensive tackle classes that I've seen in quite a while. So you really can't go wrong with any of those top 3, top 4 interior defensive guys. It's really just a matter of who the Steelers think is going to fit their scheme best. And to me, that was Derek Harmon. To you, that's the Ole Miss Rebel, Walter Nolan. But I think that's a pretty open and shut case, although it would be interesting to see Shedeur Sanders go to the black and gold here, play under Mike Tomlin.
It is possible that he falls. That is a very real possibility.
I guess I wanted to ask you if you had seen those reports and what you think of them, if they're legit. Do you think Shedeur Sanders is actually a falling quarterback, or do you think this is just media drumming up stories when there's 2 weeks to the draft and nothing going on with the NFL?
I think it's a reality that could happen. But it's one of those things to where I don't think it's legit to predict it because especially in that top 10, there's a chance that no one takes him because there's other needs for those teams. But if Sanders does fall, if he is available for some of those back half of the top 10 teams, I do think someone's going to snag him. But if he does fall outside of top 10, then yeah, Pittsburgh is the next team to go get him.
Gotcha. I just think, yeah, it's really, really, really hard for me as someone who's covering the NFL to not mock a more than one quarterback in the top 20. I mean, when's the last time that's ever happened, honestly? I don't have the statistics on that, but I know that it's fairly uncommon to have a 20 picks go by and only one quarterback selected. However, I do think teams could be hesitant with recent top pick failures like Daniel Jones and Kenny Pickett fresh in everyone's mind. Zach Wilson, you don't want to miss. And at 3, you really don't want to miss when there's a lot of good guys. And we'll talk about that later, or 2 or 3. We'll talk about 2 later. But moving on to the next team in the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens. If you want to start us off with pick 27 here, Tyler.
Yeah, we go from a team that desperately needs a quarterback to a team that absolutely does not need a quarterback. Yeah, they got one of the best quarterbacks in the league. What the Baltimore Ravens do need, though, is a safety, and I think that's what they could get. Mel Kiper, I mentioned Mel Kiper in his predictions every week. He's someone I study a lot. He thinks that this is where Malachi Starks could very easily fall as well. We've covered Malachi Starks also every week, I'm pretty sure. But I really would not be surprised if he does fall to Baltimore. Starks is definitely my favorite safety in the draft. But for the sake of not talking about the same guy every single week, I also want to talk about another safety in the realm of possibilities for if Starks gets taken before pick 27. That is Penn State safety Kevin Winston Jr. He did not have a great year in 2024. Pro Football Focus only graded him a 61, but he was ranked the 10th best safety in the country in 2023, having nearly an 80 Pro Football Focus grade that year. He's got a lot of potential, which is part of why I think he could fall, given that he didn't have a good year in 2024. But given the potential, I think a good coach like Harbaugh can definitely see that potential that he can bring, go make that risk, and make him the newest member of Baltimore's elite secondary.
Interesting. That's coming out a little bit out of left field, I feel. Did Kevin Winston Jr. pay you for a little bit of a promotion on the That's DPI podcast? Because I don't see him going anywhere near the first round.
And that's because he didn't have a good 2024 year. But when I look at the Ravens, it is very Ravens-esque to reach on a guy that's got potential, that's had great seasons in the past, and then go make him great again.
I mean, he does show up at 29 on the big board, and you do like your big board. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility. And I do think that the potential is there. He's not someone that I've looked at a whole lot. But the 10th best safety in college football in 2023 is definitely worth a look at the latter half of the first round when you can take a chance on a guy like that, especially when the Ravens have such a complete roster. That's something I was going to touch on in my analysis. The Ravens don't have a ton of weaknesses. You can't look at their roster and go, "Yep, corner is a clear weakness," or "Yep, safety is a clear weakness," because it's not. They have good guys at every position and great guys at a lot of positions. But one position that I think every team can add a first-round talent in it is edge rusher. Look at the Philadelphia Eagles and their team building strategy that won them a Super Bowl against one of the already the best dynasties in football in the Kansas City Chiefs, and clobbered them, is having a plethora of capable pass rushers in your arsenal to deploy throughout the game. I think the Ravens should adopt this strategy and will adopt this strategy beginning in the first round when they select Boston College edge Donovan Ezekwu. He would be the perfect addition. He had 16.5 sacks last season. He hyper productive. He's fast, a little bit undersized, but that's what makes him a really good rotational pass rusher. And I think that the Baltimore Ravens can rotate him really well with their current defensive line and really wreak havoc on some quarterbacks of the AFC.
You said Ezek Rukru?
Zeke Ruckwu. Yeah.
Ruckwu. Okay. He is a guy that I'm going to talk about later, and so I wanted to make sure I got that pronunciation right. No, I actually like that idea of the Baltimore Ravens stacking up their pass rush because you're absolutely right. That is definitely the formula to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. When you look at the Chiefs in the only Super Bowls that Mahomes have lost, it's teams that have obliterated their offensive line. The Philadelphia Eagles did it last year. They murdered the Chiefs' offensive line. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers did it back in the 2020 season as well. If you want to win a Super Bowl, you almost have to go through the Chiefs, and if you want to successfully do that, yeah, you got to have a great pass rush. It's almost kind of making me change my pick almost. But another team that is very likely to go edge is our number 2 overall pick, the Cleveland Browns. I want you to start off with this, though.
Really? You don't want to do your blind player comparison first before I go into what I want?
I want you to go into what you want, and then I want to go into my blind player comparison.
I'll tell you this, I can play your game because I have not looked at their Pro Football Focus grades on purpose because I kind of want to be a participant in what you have cooked up for this one. But the Browns obviously hold the second pick, the vaunted number 2 overall pick. Many years ago, my Detroit Lions selected first ballot Hall of Famer Calvin Johnson at number 2. So you can get a lot of great value here at the second pick in the draft. And to me, it's fairly obvious where you're going to get the most value. Speaking of first ballot Hall of Famers, Travis Hunter's pro comparison, according to PFF's draft overview, is Champ Bailey, first ballot Hall of Fame cornerback who played primarily for Denver. And I think that if you can pick a guy that people are comparing to Champ Bailey at number 2, you should do it. They have a huge need at corner. They have the best edge rusher in the NFL already. And while Abdul Carter would be nice, you've got to shore up that secondary when you have an outside corner that has a 50 Pro Football Focus grade. I mean, he stinks. And so Travis Hunter would really pair well on the other side of Denzel Ward and make them a formidable secondary and cover for just long enough for Myles Garrett to rack up 30 sacks in a season. I think he's durable. He's athletic. He's smart. I think Travis Hunter is absolutely going to live to the bill here and be the selection at number 2. But I'm curious as to what you have cooking for this segment.
You've changed your stance here. I actually was not expecting you to say Travis Hunter. The only name that you have mentioned with Cleveland is Abdul Carter. So now this makes the blind comparison so much better. The only 2 possibilities for the number 2 overall pick is edge from Penn State, Abdul Carter, or Travis Hunter. Both players are going to be massive additions. And so to help me break it down, we have a blind comparison. So these 2 players are, of course, Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. One of them is player 1, one of them is player 2. Player number 1, the overall grade is an 88.2. Their best situation, which if it is Travis Hunter, it's zone coverage, and if it's Abdul Carter, it's pass rush. Their best situation is an 86.8. These are Pro Football Focus grades. Their secondary situation, which is man coverage / run defense, is an 83, and is position rank in almost every category is number 1.
So that's player
number
1 here.
Player number 1, overall grade 88.2. Zone / pass rush is 86.8. And man coverage / run defense is 83.0. Player number 2, overall grade 91.3. Best situation, which is zone coverage or pass rush, is a 92.4. Their secondary position, however, which is man coverage / run defense, is only a 78.2. And once again, he is also ranked number 1 in almost every category. So quick recap again. Player 1, 88.2 overall. Best situation, 86.8. Secondary position, 83.0. Player number 2, Overall grade 91.3. Zone/pass rush 92.4. Man coverage/run defense 78.2. Based on those, who are you drafting? Player 1 or player 2?
If I'm the GM, and mind you, Tyler, I have not cheated on this. I didn't want to cheat on this on purpose.
My notes don't even say who it is. Only my brain knows who those players are.
Yeah, it's not in there. I'm going to go with player 2.
And with the second overall pick, you, Zach, have selected Abdul Carter.
Well, that makes a whole lot of sense because I do value Abdul Carter more than Travis Hunter. However, I have mocked Abdul Carter to the New York Giants in my previous video. I thought it was a surefire selection. You can go back there. I said it's 100% chance of happening. Stitched to the jersey now. Travis Hunter's great, and I think that
if they
you
do
can't go
select
wrong with
Hunter,
either of
it's a
them.
great pick. It's a
You
great
can't
pick
go
if
wrong
they
with
select
either of
Hunter.
them. But
Yeah.
I think that Travis Hunter will be the selection because, man, if you're an 86 at zone and an 83 at man, you're just a complete player altogether.
100%.
And that dude got an 88.2 overall grade on defense while playing offensive snaps for the Buffs. He plays 160 snaps a game. You cannot, when you get him on one side of the field and you allow him to run with wide receivers in the NFL, I think that he's going to transition just fine. He'll be in well conditioned, that's for sure. But the Browns should and will go Travis Hunter at 2.
I wouldn't be surprised if they do. And once again, I get it because they do have Myles Garrett locked in, so they do have their franchise edge rusher. And yeah, I agree that Travis Hunter could very easily be a Champ Bailey kind of guy. And I think it's a great pick. And then kind of getting into a little bit of a different week, but the Giants picks the latter, I think.
Gotcha. I think that this is going to be one of the harder ones to switch because I think it could go either way. But it seems you and I are going on opposite directions. You agree Abdul Carter, and I agree Travis Hunter at 2. But we'll have to see how that plays out on draft night. Moving on to the final team in the AFC North, your favorite team, Tyler, the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yes, I do, in fact, love my Bengals just as much as you love your Niners, Zach.
Oh, that one stings.
This is a tough one to predict, though, and I had to be unbiased here. But it's still a tough one to predict because the Bengals need almost everything except for offensive skilled positions. So to help me actually do it, as I actually did my own mock draft just to see who I think the best defensive player available at pick 17 would be. As a result of this, I kind of go back to my analysis to Pittsburgh when you look at the guys between Walter Nolan and Kenneth Grant. Both of these guys are great at their position, and I think whoever the Bengals take is going to be the latter is going to end up in Pittsburgh. So kind of go back to Nolan and Grant again. Nolan is 8th on Pro Football Focus's big board, Grant being 17th. Nolan had a much better grade this year, and he improved tremendously this past year compared to last year, jumping 15 Pro Football Focus points. That is Nolan. That's Walter Nolan. He jumped 15 points in his grade from this year compared to last year.
He went from 201st to 8th.
Yeah. And so if both guys are on the board, I don't see why Nolan is not the guy to go to Cincinnati. But maybe he's not. Maybe the Bengals are not smart. Maybe they like to draft the way they sign contracts, and that's not smartly. And so maybe they take Grant instead. As a Chiefs fan, I hope they take Grant over Nolan.
Interesting. So I think that you definitely did go with the smart pick with Walter Nolan, but I know that you have him mocked a couple of other places. So it's possible that Walter Nolan perhaps goes elsewhere. And if I think that if he goes early, it might leave one guy available at 17 that I think the Bengals could really take advantage of. Obviously, the Bengals missed the playoffs last year, so they are not picking very high. I mean, very late in the draft. They have a mid-round pick. So I think that this guy has a potential to be available, even though he appears at 13th on the big board. That's Mike Green, Marshall pass rusher. There were some character concerns with Mike Green. And I've talked about him before, but he was the most productive pass rusher in college last season and ranked second only to finishing behind Abdul Carter. And he could fall solely because of those character concerns. And if he does fall to 17, I think the Bengals would be foolish to not take him, especially with Trey Hendrickson's future up in the air. They have not signed him to a contract yet. As of this recording, they have not. I mean, it would be very fitting for us at the That's DPI podcast to record and then check our phones afterwards and see $100 bajillion million contract signed to Trey Hendrickson. But Mike Green would be the answer to an edge rush problem if something does fall through with Trey Hendrickson, or if they do get their contract signed, he would be a great compliment.
Just
However,
checked my notifications, and you are correct. No contract to Hendrickson as of right now.
Thank goodness. I'm correct on one thing at least today. But if they don't go Mike Green, I'm going to go very controversial here and say they select Nick Imanwuri, the safety out of South Carolina, the combine standout. Safety is a massive need for Cincinnati, and I don't think Starks will be here at 17. And even if he was, I think they would still go with the combine standout, standing at 6'3", running a 4.38 40 and benching 20 reps at the bench press at the combine. He is a one-of-a-kind athlete at safety, even though he appears in the 60s on the PFF big board. A lot of people are ranking him high solely because of his athleticism. And I think some teams might be enamored by that. And a team like the Bengals, who draft skill positions really well, may be one of those teams. So those are the two guys that I'm mocking right now to Cincy.
Yeah, I don't disagree necessarily with any of your predictions there. I really think whether it's Mike Green, Walter Nolan, Kenneth Grant, Malachi Starks, I think it's just who is the best defensive player available. If Starks falls, they get Starks. If Starks gets taken, all right, who's the defensive lineman that they're going to take?
So
Who's
kind
the
of like
best
when
available?
the Rams last year took Jared Verse at 15.
Yeah.
Just because he was DPI at that point.
He was there.
And they needed defense, and he ended up being a great player for them. So I think that I like what you're saying. Fortunately, this draft, a lot more defensive players should go before 17. But I do think that they are definitely going to target BPA on defense because that's where they needed the most help. I know all the Twitter memes saying that the Bengals are still going to lose games because their defense allows 60 points per game, even though their offense scores 50. So we'll see how that ends up for them.